I'm going to be talking about my book, Racism Without Racists. The book I chose is Racism Without Racists, Colorblind Racism and the Persistence of Racial Inequality in America by Eduardo Bonilla Silva. This work critically examines how racism persists in the U.S. despite claims of a post-racial society. Bonilla Silva introduces the concept of colorblind racism to explain the subtle ways inequality is maintained, even in the absence of overt prejudice. The author of this book is Eduardo Bonilla Silva, and Silva is a renowned sociologist and former president of the American Sociological Association. He earned his PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has taught at Texas A&M and Duke University. His research focuses on systemic racism, racial ideology, and social theory. Racism Without Racists is widely respected in academic circles and is often used in college courses to illustrate how structural racism functions in contemporary society. The summary of the book: Silva argues that racism today is maintained through an ideology of colorblindness, where people claim to not see race, yet still support policies and attitudes that maintain racial inequality. He introduces four main frames of colorblind racism: abstract liberalism, naturalization, cultural racism, and minimization of racism. These ways of thinking allow people, especially white Americans, to deny the reality of racism while contributing to its persistence. The first key term to connect to our course is systemic racism. In Race and Racisms, Boza explains that racism is not simply about individual beliefs or actions, but about social structures and systems of power. This is found on page 9. Silva supports this by stating the new racism is subtle, institutional, and apparently non-racial, and you can find this on page 3. Both texts highlight that racism operates through institutions, such as housing, education, and the justice system, not just through personal prejudice. The second key term is colorblind ideology. Boza writes, colorblind racism allows people to ignore the ways in which race continues to shape life chances, and this is found on page 149. Silva builds on this idea by describing how phrases like, "I don't see color," allow individuals to avoid responsibility for racial inequality. He also explains, colorblind racism serves today as the ideological armor for a covert and institutionalized system of racial oppression, and this can be found on page 26. The third key term connecting to our course is racial ideology and cultural racism. Boza defines racial ideology as a set of beliefs that justify racial inequality, found on page 22. Silva gives a clear example of this through the cultural racism frame, where minorities are blamed for their own hardships. He writes, blacks do worse than whites because they lack the proper values. This can be found on page 49, showing how stereotypes are used to rationalize inequality without acknowledging structural barriers. Ideas taken away from this book are the impact on perceptions and stereotypes. The book challenges readers to rethink how they view racism, not as something obvious and hateful, but as embedded in everyday thinking. It doesn't reinforce stereotypes, rather it exposes how they are repackaged in subtle and acceptable ways. This shift in perspective encourages deeper conversations about race, privilege, and fairness in society. The reason why I chose this book is because I've often heard people say things like race doesn't matter anymore, and I wanted to understand how that belief can still support racism. As someone who has witnessed inequality in schools and especially sports, this book helped me connect those experiences to broader systems. It gave me the language to describe what I've seen and felt but couldn't always explain. These are the 3 pictures in a collage that I put together that represent the main idea. The first picture on the far left is to support systemic racism. The one in the middle is to support colorblind ideology, and the one on the far right is to support racial ideology and cultural racism. What did I learn from this assignment? This assignment taught me that racism is often invisible to those who don't experience it. I learned how language, policy, and silence can all contribute to inequality. Next